Hey everyone, it's Miss Lopez. I'm going to go over the rubric for grading the FRQ disturbances so that you guys can check yourself. Let's get started. Part A asks to discuss the expected changes in biodiversity as the stages of succession progress as shown in the diagram above. You'll notice that this question is worth 2 points maximum. You're going to get 1 point per bullet. So the first bullet you're going to earn is talking about that biodiversity increases. So you do need to talk about the focus on this is that the biodiversity is increasing. And here are any of the reasons why biodiversity increases. You don't need all 3 of them. You just need 1 of these bullets to earn the second point. So for this part up here, this is worth 1 point, that bullet. And then any of these will earn you the second bullet or the second point for this question. So you could talk about how some populations, you have to use the term facilitate specifically. This is one of your vocab words. Biodiversity or succession. You have to talk, or you could talk about how more niches or habitats are formed. Again, that is a specific term. So you do have to say niches. You can't just give me a general description. You can simply say more habitats as well. And then the last one is the bottom of your pyramid, because of the larger number of producers that are available with the increasing trees and plant matter, that the bottom of any energy pyramid is going to be is going to increase, which will support more numbers on the upper pyramids or the upper levels when we're talking about those energy pyramids. All right, part B is asking to describe and explain 2 changes in the abiotic conditions over time that lead to succession, as shown in the diagram above. So you're referencing the diagram of the trees, or going from the tree, from the field to the trees. This question is worth 4 points. Please note that it's not enough to say what the condition is. So if you just said the light will change, the temperature will change, humidity change, you have to talk about in which direction is that change going to go. So is it going to increase or decrease? And then when you talk about your explanation also has to match that condition. So this is not the exhaustive list. There's more possible answers. These were just the common answers that College Board found in this particular exam. So you get 2 points maximum per abiotic condition. In other words, in any single row across here, if you talk about this correctly and you explain it correctly, then this entire row is worth 2 points. So because they're asking you to do 2 of them, if you do this entire row correctly, you would earn 1 point. And then if you do this entire row correctly, I'm sorry, let's try that again. You would earn 2 points, as you can see. Even though they tell you here, it looks like you could earn 3, you actually can only earn 2 per row. So if you talk about the increase in the soil quantity and you explain why it changes the abiotic condition, then that's going to earn you the 2 points necessary for this. Whereas if you go in and talk about soil quantity, and you don't talk about how it changes the abiotic condition, but you explain how that will enhance succession, then you can earn your 2 points that way. So within any row, you can earn a maximum of 2 points. The most common one that students are going to talk about is going to be soil quantity. They're also going to talk about the light availability, because that's something that students can relate to if you have more trees, obviously there's going to be more shade. And then another one that's very common is the increase in temperature, because as you increase the shade, you increase the temperature of that area. But again, this is not the exhaustive list. There is more. If you have anything or you talked about anything that's not on this list, as long as it's an abiotic condition, so you can't talk about animals, you can't talk about plants, that it's an increase of plants, you have to talk about an abiotic condition, email us and we will give you more feedback on that one. Otherwise, this question is worth a total of 4 points. Part C is asking you to compare primary succession to secondary succession. And not only are you comparing what they are, but you're discussing how that affects the ecosystem in general. So you can see that this question is worth 4 points maximum as you compare both 1 and 2. So the first point for question C1 and C2. So for C1, you have to talk about that primary succession takes longer than secondary succession. So on C1, that is an example of primary succession because there's no soil left behind in the ecosystem. It's now completely covered with lava, and so now it's going to take a lot of time to break that lava down into soil before the organisms are going to be able to move back in. In secondary succession, what happens with this 10 kilometer portion of forest, the soil is still present. So it's going to take only, let's say, 100 years for this area to come back, as opposed to the thousands, possibly millions of years that it's going to take for the area that underwent primary succession. So just to kind of, this is our primary succession right here. This is secondary succession because all that was removed was the forest. There is still soil left behind, so that is secondary succession. So you would get 1 point for comparing the amount of time. There's your comparison that the primary succession, or if you want to talk about the lava area, is going to take longer than the secondary succession, or the forest, the clear-cut forest, it's going to take much longer than the clear-cut forest. So that's 1 point. Then for the second point comes from the description of the different types of soil. So the nice thing about this question is that it does have a little bit of flexibility built in. And what I mean by that is if you count up the number of points, you can see here that there's 1 point for the comparison and then 1 point for each of these blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, plus this one means you actually have 5 points possible. But 4 points is the maximum you would get awarded. So even if you missed one of these points, let's say you didn't talk about this correctly, you have a little bit of buffer built into this question. This is something that College Board used to do several years ago, and that's why you can have a you can see that the points are higher that you could earn than the maximum number of possible. I don't want to really call it extra credit, but I like to think of it more as a buffer. College Board doesn't do that anymore, but this content is still relevant with ecology. So we use this particular example in your notebook instead of as an actual FRQ. So we're going to talk about in situation 1. Again, we had already identified it as primary succession. You could also say it's a situation which was no soil, but in our case, we really would want you guys to use those vocabulary to keep it as simple as possible. So you would say that it's primary succession. And then the reason why these are the long-term effects, or this is the reason why that in that primary succession with there's no available soil, then when you compare that to the long-term effects, why does this take longer? It's because you have to break down, you have to weather the lava into soil. Pioneer species can do that, or it can be simple weathering by erosion. And that's going to take a lot more time than it's going to take for secondary succession. You can also talk about another abiotic factor here. This is the light availability. And so any organisms that are going to survive and thrive and reproduce are going to be the kinds that require a lot of light energy. The second bullet point, or the next row, is talking about the clear-cut forest. You're identifying that as secondary succession. That's the easiest way to do it. And then you can also talk about in the immediate effects that there's still soil present. And because there's still soil present, you still have microbes, there's still seeds in the soil, and then, or maybe even underground organisms. But then in the long-term effect, what's going to happen is because you no longer have those trees there, you might get erosion and soil loss, and a change in the light availability because now you don't have all that shade that was previously there. This actually may be a benefit to smaller plants that are waiting for that moment or waiting for that opportunity for more light to be available, like such as when a tree falls, and then this is their chance to sprout. I hope this rubric was helpful to you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.